That's not much. everyone present at the meeting. This will be live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Clearly, once the officers present their reports, if when I open it up for questionings, if you could please raise your hand, and then I will call you in the order your hands are raised. And those of you who are currently not on screen at the moment, if you could please put the camera on so that the public actually see who's speaking, and if you could sort of introduce yourself as well first time round so that people know who's speaking at the appropriate time. Thank you. Okay, item number 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any, Gareth?
Councillor Wood and Councillor Prother have indicated they're running a bit late, but they'll join us when they can. So I'm expecting them in the next 10-20 minutes, Chair.
Okay, if we just note when they arrive, that would be great. Item 2 then is the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of September 2022. As we recall that we just had some slight technical issues at that meeting, people not being able to get in and such like. Hopefully that's been resolved or is being resolved for the future. But if we just look at the minutes currently, and these are just for correctness only, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. Someone prepared to move, please? Councillor Hooper, thank you. Someone prepared to second?
I will, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. Can I have a show of hands? Those against, because it's easier that way than those forward. Okay, there's no one against. Thank you. That's noted as a correct record. Item number 4 then is the references from the Health Living and
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just go back? We missed declaration of interest, Chair.
Oh, sorry, that's my apologies. Item 3, sorry, declaration of interest. Better on then.
Thank you.
I want to get on to the business. Item number 4 then, deprivation of liberty safeguards annual update. This is the referral from the scrutiny committee to us, and it's referred to us for consideration. And that's you, Natasha, is it, I assume?
Yes, that's me. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Natasha James. I'm the operational manager for safeguarding within social services. And this is an annual update report in relation to the activity in relation to deprivation of liberty safeguards. It's been referred here because previously this has been an area of interest in relation to, we had significant backlog, which I'll come on to in a second. But just to give you some context, this is a partnership team hosted by the Vale of Glamorgan on behalf of Cardiff Vale Health Board, Cardiff Council and ourselves. So in relation to this area of business, there was an amendment to the Mental Capacity Act that looked to introduce a new framework that would replace the deprivation of liberty safeguards, and that is called the Liberty Protection Safeguards. It was anticipated that that new framework would come into place April 22. However, there's been a delay around that and then further delay. So in relation to where we currently are, we've consulted on the code of practice associated, and we have contributed to some of the discussions with Welsh Government, but as yet, we don't know when liberty protection safeguards will be in place, and we're still working within the deprivation of liberty safeguards framework. But what's to note in relation to this area of work is there was significant backlog. We were never able to meet the demands of the applications. However, during this period of time, and I would say in the last 18 months, there was significant funding made available from Welsh Government in order to address those backlogs of applications in order to position ourselves more effectively for the new framework of LPS. And I just probably raise your highlight to you that currently, if you could look at the figures under point 2.4, and I'm talking about, these are figures for the Vale of Glamorgan. We'd had a backlog of applications of 322 in 2020-21, and as of June 22, we were looking at a backlog of applications to process, 75, with the dates of the backlog being in applications made in May and June 22. So that has had a positive impact, really, and it's probably of note for yourselves because this has been an area that's been included on our risk register. So it's just to give you an overview of where this team currently is. If that funding runs out, if I'm honest, I probably would be in the same position. But as it is at the moment, we have a project team that concentrates solely on supporting that activity.
Sorry, thank you for that, Natasha. Are you happy to take some questions now, please, if there are any?
Yes, I am.
Any questions from members? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Natasha, for that. Just a couple of points of clarification, really, and to aid my understanding, if you don't mind. I'm just interested where applications come from. And also, a second thing is what the impact of the backlog is on individuals and what the consequences of the logjam is. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of where they come from, deprivation of liberty safeguards, where we are deemed as being a supervisory body, so a managing authority. So that would be currently under deprivation of liberty safeguards, and I'm going to use DOLS as an acronym, I'm sorry, because it's shorter to say. They come from residential care homes because they are setting specific. So more often than not, they will be from a residential care home or from a hospital wards or a hospital setting. So that's where they come from. The impact, so there's impact on the individual, is that they're being deprived of their liberty illegally. So that there is nobody to say that we have satisfied the criteria for depriving that person of their liberty. And this is the only framework that allows for that to happen outside of criminal law or mental health law. So that's, and the consequence in terms of, for us as a local authority, is a challenge about actually, unlawfully having somebody in a setting without having had that their liberty assessed that they meet a certain criteria. That's as simply as I could put it for you. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from anyone? No, can I just ask a question, Natasha? I think clearly you're to be congratulated, the team's to be congratulated from bringing the numbers down as they have done, from, even last year, 322 down to currently 75, with the longest wait now only being sort of 4 months, really, which is, and I should imagine some of those are new applications anyway. So, I think that you're to be congratulated on that. The only thing that ever concerns me is when you increase capacity by way of grants, the grant runs out, and there, where does the directorate see this in the order? It either needs to be built into the baseline budget to do the activity, or what will happen is, if there's no money, the numbers will start going up again. So I hear what you say about, it's there as long as the grant is there. For when the grant is withdrawn, if it is withdrawn, it will be at some stage, given the current financial state of Welsh Government funding. And it will be, I should imagine, we just need to be mindful, because local government funding next year is going to be an absolute nightmare. So, where does this come in the priorities? Because again, the main people who are affected are the ones who you're taking their liberty from, really, and that just gives me concern.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We can't rely on that level of funding continuously. I think there's a couple of things. The new LPS framework streamlines this process, so it becomes rather than having a dedicated team of people, it will become part of individual practitioners' responsibilities, and there will be different levels of challenge. So it won't be only a deprivation of liberty safeguards team deal with that. It will be within our case management teams in adult and children's services. And that was the driver behind looking at the changes in legislation. However, until such time, I appreciate that our demand has always outstripped what we've got as a resource. So that we will continually be reviewing that and applying for what we can during this period, and then looking at those baseline budgets and where that needs to sit in the future in the kind of new arrangements of how we work.
Okay, and would you say that if the grant funding is withdrawn, you have the capacity internally, your social workers and practitioners actually have the capacity to take on this extra level of responsibility? Because I should imagine they're currently stretched as they are. Yeah,
in terms of the approach, the approach means that we would have to have practitioners who are, what we're doing currently is trying to upskill practitioners in these teams in terms of the Mental Capacity Act and the requirements around that, so that come such time that we work under the new LPS framework, they have the skills and confidence to do that. There is additional funding coming from Welsh Government in terms of our workforce training, so we have had some additionality to do that. So that's the approach we're taking at the moment. Okay. But I do take the point that if we do run out of that money, that we could quickly see that backlog building up again, and we'd have to take different steps to address it.
Do you currently have any vacancies in your adult services team then to cover this?
It won't be in terms of looking at vacancies in the adult services team, because we do currently have a deprivation of liberty safeguards team, so we don't have any vacancies there. But when we look at how that will operate under the new framework, then we obviously will look at what increased resource we need in those teams, if any.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hooper.
Just another one for understanding, really. I'm just interested, what's the rejection rate on applications? Is there a...
I think you have quite a significant withdrawal. So the managing authorities who've made the applications will withdraw for a number of reasons. Quite often, sadly, that's because maybe the individual has passed away, or that they are no longer in a setting and being deprived of their liberty in the same way. I could get you the figures. I wouldn't want to say to you off the top of my head, just because I wouldn't want to give you the wrong numbers.
I'd be interested.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from anyone? Are there any comments? No, obviously we've got the report which was referred to us from scrutiny, just to, I think, note the contents of the report. I think we note them and, and note the improvement that's been made on the figures. The only point I would ask is, if obviously grant funding ends in the next 6 months, and I think you only report these annually because the background papers were November 21, October 19 and September 18, so they're an annual report. If you lose the funding and the figures start to go up, I think, as an audit and governance committee, we would like to see this sooner rather than later. I understand, it goes through scrutiny committee, but I wouldn't want to wait for scrutiny to point it to us again. So if you could keep a weather eye on that, please, for us.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So we've got the recommendation to note. Someone prepared to move, please? I just need a hand. Thank you. Someone prepared to second? Thank you. Councillor Hooper proposed, Nigel seconded. Anyone against? Just show. No, thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Natasha, on that. Very grateful. Thank you for attending the meeting.
Thanks, all. Bye-bye.
The next report is and that an annual self-assessment 21-22. I think that's you, Tom.
It is. Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. I'm Tom Barron. I'm the Director of Corporate Resources. I'm bringing this reference to your committee, Chair, this evening from Cabinet following their consideration earlier on in the month. committee be aware that you've got a new role as part of the self-assessment process that's set out in the Local Government and Elections Act. So you saw the draft self-assessment report previously, and we're now bringing it to your committee as a requirement of that legislation post consultation to seek any views of the committee. As I say, the version that you've got as part of the reference is the post-consultation report. There are a couple of appendices to the Cabinet report. The first is the revised draft self-assessment, which Cabinet endorsed, subject to your views as a committee this evening. The second, Appendix B, is the consultation report, which just summarises the findings of that consultation on the document itself. And I remember we had some discussion at a previous Governance and Audit Committee about reflecting consultation within the document itself, and it does indeed reflect engagement, involvement and consultation activity throughout the year. The process that we're going through now is consulting on the document itself, and over the last couple of months we've consulted with citizens, with staff, with elected members through the scrutiny process, with our partners and also with trade unions, and you'll see in Appendix B that the feedback from those various stakeholders is reflected in the report. This report, when it was brought as a draft to your committee, a couple of the queries that were made related to providing some further narrative around the council's support for residents during a cost of living crisis, and also the proposals around the redevelopment of the former Aberthorpe power station site. And we've reflected some updates in the report to reflect that. The conclusion that we've reached is that the judgments that the self-assessment report made are correct, and as a result of the consultation as well, that the council's wellbeing objectives remain relevant. But importantly, this is a report that's got a future focus, and it's about what are the areas that we need to be reflecting our activity on going into 23-24, and that the proposed areas of future focus are the ones that are set out in detail in the report itself. I think it's fair to say, Chair, that the consultation findings present a mixed picture. When people were asked whether we'd achieved the priorities that we set ourselves in the 21-22 year, certainly the public response was generally more positive around providing care and support and improving infrastructure, but least supportive or positive about our response to climate change through Project Zero and supporting people through the cost of living crisis. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on in the way that we communicate what the work of the council is doing, and making sure that we're talking to people throughout the year in terms that they understand and want to engage with. And the council's Participate programme, the new public participation strategy, has got a real area of focus on that work going forward. I think it's pleasing to see that the public survey concludes that what we're proposing to do in the coming years are the correct things. So that focus on cost of living, the focus on decarbonisation, providing support for those most vulnerable and in need of our care. So that's a bit of a kind of overview of the point of the process that we're at now, Chair. The report is being brought to your committee for any comments. If you have any, they would go back to Cabinet. If you don't have any comments, the report would make its way on to full council.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. Any questions, please? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Tom. And it's very minor, Tom. I was just in the last Governance and Audit Committee, we talked about this marina, 14.3 million. We referenced, you said it was a mistake in there. If it was a mistake, it's still a mistake in the narrative. We have since been successful in securing nearing 14.3 million to transform Barry Docks waterfront.
What page is that?
It's on page 9. It's the same point as I made before.
Last time.
and the wording's the same.
Have we got that, Tom?
Bear with me, Chair. I'm just scrolling to the right page. My apologies, Councillor Hooper, if that is the case. I'm just trying to find the reference because it had been updated. Yeah, my apologies, because we had discussed that, as you say, Councillor Hooper, and we had actually agreed a set of revised wording. It was also picked up by a colleague in Environment and Regeneration Committee. So, with your permission, Chair, what I'll ask Gareth and Democratic Services to do is to circulate the revised paragraph to your committee as a matter of urgency, so that you can see that it has been reflected. It was picked up, Councillor Hooper, and that we'll make sure that then, in referring this back to Cabinet, that we make it clear that that amendment needs to be made to the relevant paragraph on page 9.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor Hooper? Anything else?
I've got just a point of a note, really. I think, Chair, if I can just in relation, Tom, and just the reference to the way that we talk about general public, their interest in this report. I think we've got to be careful not to just say that we've got a miscommunication problem. I think when people talk to you about things that they believe to be true, I think we've got to take that with a bit more humility than to just suggest we're not communicating properly or well enough with people. And I think that's just it's a reflection maybe on the way this was just presented to us. I just urge caution on that one. There's nothing to add or to change in the report, though, Chair.
That's okay. Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Goodjohn.
Hello, thank you, Tom. I just wanted to mention the consultation in Appendix B, that we only received 120 responses from the public and 20 from staff or thereabouts. I just wondered if you believe this was a true and accurate record of the views we were trying to gather, because as you're aware, 120 people isn't representative of the Vale of Glamorgan, and particularly a lot of the people who will have responded to the consultation, including staff, will be people who are a lot more engaged in what's going on, and perhaps is not the correct demographics of what we're trying to achieve with our consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Tom, just.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Yes, absolutely. I suppose the response rate was higher than it has been in previous years on similar exercises, but it's still, as you say, a very low number in comparison with our population, and it isn't going to be representative because it's not that kind of piece of work. I suppose the challenge is when we are consulting on a document that is a hugely wide-ranging piece of work reflecting all of the activities that the organisation does, and therefore we quite often see on these kind of corporate consultations that actually it's quite difficult for people to want to be part of that kind of process. Where we get much better engagement is on very specific issues that people feel are very relevant to them, and I think that maybe plays into part of what Councillor Hooper's earlier point was as well. And I think the trick for us is in having that more ongoing conversation and reflecting that within the self-assessment, so that actually there's lots of views that are built up and reflected in the report overall. The consultation on the final product is less important than the conversation I think that we have on an ongoing basis throughout the year on things that people want to participate around. And in terms of the kind of representative nature of consultation, I'm hoping that we'll run a public opinion survey within the next 12 months, finance dependent, and that would be weighted and representative in terms of the Vale of Glamorgan, so that we can understand the voice of our residents more holistically than a consultation on a big report like this, if you like.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wood, no question?
Yes,
now?
Well, it was funny because somebody pointed out the typo earlier, and then I remembered that somebody mentioned previously that we had a typo on page 34. But I think it's more a linguistic thing when I look at it. When an additional 29,000, which is an improvement on. It was just a small typo that somebody pointed out before, and I just thought I'd find it. But I think it does make sense actually. So I take my hand down on that one.
That's okay. Thanks, Councillor Wood. Any other questions? Any comments from anyone? Tom, I'd make a comment. I think Councillor Goodjohn actually stole my thunder because I was going to raise reference to the numbers game of, responses to the consultation. When you come to staff, only 20 staff participated in it. The number of public consultation, the maximum was 122. Given the population of the Vale, I thought that was extremely poor, really. But I've just heard what you've said. This is the first time you've done it this way anyway in regards to new legislation. You were time restricted, and all I hope is that next year a lot better sort of consultation strategy goes out. We've got dare I say it, we've got elected representatives on this committee and the council. They're the community advocates. They could raise some of this in wherever this forum they do, and it just needs to be a lot bigger and a lot better, really, for the public to understand. Same with trade unions. Trade unions, no response whatsoever. So I think it just needs an exercise of sort of raising the profile of this, what it means to individuals, and certainly, next year, let's see where we go. But the small number syndrome, I think, were quite appalling, really. But that's my view. Sorry, Matthew.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And sorry, Tom. I'm probably at risk of repeating the same theme here, but I guess it was just my thought when I read through that. When I looked through the comments, it felt very much like this is our report and we've added the comments and we're going to chuck them in at the end, rather than. And that's a very cynical view, rather than the sort of, here's some comments, and we're going to present it with an integrated view of how that really affects the plan. And I say it as a comment because I don't think we need to change anything from this year, but I think from going forward to next year, it's just that bit more thought that says if we're getting recurring themes, whether at this stage or previous stages, how we're actually then reflecting the value of the input, whether it be 120, whether it be 1,200, reflecting that value in that people feel like they say has actually been taken into account. So I think I'm probably treading on everybody's toes when I'm talking about engagement, but I guess that's my view of how I read it coming across.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Okay. If there are no other comments, then we see the recommendation there. Obviously, just subject, I think, to the typographicals and maybe just some thought for next year. Can I take it that committee approve the report as drafted, just subject to the typographicals? Yep. Okay. So in favour, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Goodjohn, can I say you seconded that? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tom, for that. Item 6 then, which is the statement of accounts 21-22. Gemma.
Hi, good evening. Just to give you an update on the current position of the audit of the accounts. So when I last came to see you, it was in July, and we were just starting off with the audit. In terms of picking up the joint committees first, the shared regulatory service audit has been completed and the accounts were signed off at the end of September. In terms of the regional adoption service, the examination is underway and a significant proportion of the testing's been undertaken. Similarly, on the Vale accounts, the majority of testing's been undertaken. There's some minor bits of sampling, some work on related parties, and I think cash flow that remains outstanding. I'm happy to pick up the kind of nature of the issues that have been picked up, but I'm conscious that I don't know whether Audit Wales have got anything they want to pick up about the the quality of the accounts or any of the issues that have been picked up. So Ian, I'm not sure, Chair, through you, Ian, whether you've got anything you wanted to say on the accounts, or whether you're happy that I just cover the issues.
Yeah, happy, and there's no, just for everyone else's benefit, there's no financial auditor here, but they weren't able to attend tonight. But there's nothing to relay in terms of anything. So happy for you to carry on, Gemma.
Brilliant, thank you. So in terms of the issues, I mean, I think I probably gave you a sense when I brought the accounts back in July. I think the majority of the issues are QA related. So just looking to strengthen our QA processes for next year. There are a couple of issues that are still under discussion, neither of which are material. There's a treatment of a transaction with Transport for Wales at year end, which I treated in the accounts as a deferred capital receipt, and I'm just working through with Audit Wales the appropriate treatment. And then there's also some discussion around our treatment of deferred social services income. Again, this isn't a material issue, but it's come out of another local authority audit, and I think there's some inconsistency with the accounting across Wales. So we're again working through that issue with Audit Wales, but our proposal at the moment is that we'll make some additional disclosure in the 21-22 debtors note and then do further work for next year's accounts. In terms of the position with infrastructure assets, as you'll be aware, there's been an ongoing issue with infrastructure assets throughout the accounts and in previous years as well. So my understanding of the latest position is that a paper was taken to FRAB, which is the Financial Reporting Advisory Board, which set out a proposal around an additional disclosure note for infrastructure assets and then derecognition. The board felt that there wasn't enough support for the derecognition element of the paper, but that the disclosure note would be accepted and put into the code. In terms of derecognition now, that has been dealt with via statutory override in Scotland and in England. So Wales is now looking at that legislation, and there's a couple of approaches that Wales is working through at the moment in terms of getting that legislation in. So we're expecting a letter to come out from Welsh Government to extend timescales, and then once that legislation's in, we'll be able to correct the accounts and for this infrastructure element, and then hopefully, all being well, the accounts will then be signed off. I think the key issue to be picked up as part of that legislation is the retrospection, and so that's the issue that's being worked through by Welsh Government. Those are the main issues I was going to pick up on the audit, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gemma. I think in reality, though, we're in a position whereby, whilst we can note where we're at the moment, we're not in a position anytime soon yet to sign off the accounts until they've resolved this issue about infrastructure assets. I find it interesting to note that England and Scotland have already got their regulations in place, and I assume that they'll be signing off their accounts in England and Scotland, and Welsh Government are now taking the view as to what we should do. I was going to be quite cynical and say which year they're going to bring the regulations out, but I shan't do that. But you know, I think the issue for me is that, you know, clearly I think our position at the moment, subject to what committee says, is we just note the position at the moment, and then as and when you bring the accounts back, we can have a detailed discussion when they come back at that time. And I understand, I think we did discuss that if it's any time soon, we may need just a special committee to deal with the accounts and sign them off. So subject to what members consider, I think if we just note, as it says there, the current position in regards to the statement of accounts for 21-22, we note the position in regards to the proposals to rectify the infrastructure issues, and we note the audit of the shared regulatory service, statement of accounts, and the Vale and Cardiff Regional Adoption Service. If people are happy with that, then we'll move on. Sorry, Councillor Good, John.
Can I quickly ask that in future we get a little bit more detail in the reports regarding what the issues are if issues come up like this again? Because I know it mentions infrastructure, but it doesn't go into much detail about why and what is going on in the accounts. And it's great to have you here, but it would be nice to have it in the report as well for us to note.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that's there in future.
Thank you, Councillor Good, John. So everyone, someone prepared to move that we just note the position in regards to the 3 matters? Thank you, Matthew. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Good, John. Anyone against? No. Thank you, Gemma, for that. Item then 7 is the review of the fraud and governance as part of the external audit by Audit Wales. Is that you, Ian? Or is it Matt?
It'll be Matt, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, I'm Matt Bomer, I'm Head of Finance, the Council Section 151 Officer. It's a short but important report. Ordinarily as well, it had come to alongside the final audited statement of accounts, the final annual governance statement and Audit Wales ISA 260. And as you've just discussed, those are delayed primarily because of the infrastructure issue. But talking through with Steve at Audit Wales, he was happy that we brought this part forward at this stage this evening. So I say important piece of work that underpins our accounts. And whilst it's broadly set out as fraud and governance, it covers 3 broad areas. As management and as those charged with governance, this Governance and Audit Committee, we've responsibility to ensure that we prevent and detect fraud, that we ensure that operations undertaken by the Council comply with relevant law regulation, and that we're fully mindful of related party relationships that impact on the accounts. And all of that is done to ensure the integrity and accuracy of the accounts that we bring forward for sign off by this committee. So as part of that process, on an annual basis, Audit Wales write to us to gain assurance, and the letter that they've sent to us is attached at Appendix A, and then to that letter there are 3 appendices, 1, 2 and 3, and they cover the matters of fraud, laws and regulations and related transactions. In the body of the report, so in those appendices, you'll find our full responses to the questions posed to us by Audit Wales, and in the body of the report, in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.6, a broad summary of the issues. In all honesty, there aren't any issues, and there's no concerns to report to you this evening. So I'll just leave it at that in terms of presenting the report, Chair.
Thank you for that, Matt. Are there any questions? Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Matt. Just a question: is the ownership of the words in here, the narrative? So you've referenced the Governance and Audits Committee. Is it us saying that, or is it you saying that on our behalf?
That's a good question. We're effectively saying that on your behalf, but we're asking your consideration of it this evening. So I guess if there's any concerns that you had with the responses in front of you, there's opportunity for you to say so.
I'm comfortable with it. I just want to make sure that we've got to own these words, haven't we? Essentially. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was a similar point, actually, which is just regarding the word. There's a few of these. It's coming up in the covering papers, just about clarity of what we're actually being asked to do. So in this one, it says at the end of the purpose of the report, it just says for review. The recommendation says that the contents of this report of me in the papers. So again, I didn't have any questions about it. I think it's a positive report. Obviously, you're not saying, you know, we're obviously saying we're not committing fraud. That's a good thing in my book. But again, if we can just maybe be a bit clearer about what it is the purpose of each report is and what we as a committee are being asked to do, I'd really appreciate it for future, please.
Yeah, we will do that.
Okay, Matthew.
Thanks, Chair. Matt, maybe it's a question for you, or maybe if Mark's on, it's a question for Mark as well. if I put my internal audit hat on, and this came across my desk in my day job, there'd be a couple of bits from an internal audit perspective that I might not be comfortable with. I think there's a couple of bits, and I think the bit that jumps out at me is number 3 in inquiries management in relation to fraud. It says any concerns regarding internal controls, etc., reflected in audit recommendations. And I thought that was a strange place to start. If we look at your 3 lines of defence model, everything would start with your management of the area and then your expertise behind that, and then audit kind of sits over the top of that. And I wonder whether are we in danger of pinning everything down to internal audit? And I think, if I'm right, there's one further down as well that talks about the work of internal audit in assurance overall laws and regulations. And anytime I see anything with all an internal audit, I start to get worried, because I wonder, and again, maybe this is a question for Mark, but I'd struggle to say any internal audit activity has the scope and the knowledge to say we are comfortable that we covered all regulations and legislation. So I guess it's just that clarity of words for me.
Yeah, I'll come in first, and then I'm sure Mark can add a couple of words as well. I'd probably agree with your general comment that we've perhaps focused on the 3rd line of defence and don't talk about the wider control environment that's in place in the council to prevent fraud. And for that reason, we might look at expanding this section in future years. And that's a helpful comment. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Well, both Matts actually. Yeah, the point you raised, Matt, is accurate, because in my annual report, it talks about the work that we do, but we can't give full assurance that we cover everything that goes on within the organisation, because responsibility, for prevention, detection of fraud lies with management in the first instance. Obviously, internal audit have got a role to play, and we've got a fraud investigator as part of the service. So I think maybe the standard sort of arrangements, the sort of first line, has sort of been assumed rather than sort of explicitly stated. But yeah, so I think that's worth adding in for future years, as you rightly flag up. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Mark, I was going to ask a similar question in regards to what was your actual professional view on the responses, because obviously you were sort of, even though you provide the service, does this actually reflect your professional?
Accurate response as possible, but I don't think any of us can say that everything works 100% all of the time. It's but I think the answers to the question do reflect the situation at the Vale. I think what he says all. I think there's some examples later on at some point in this document around instances of fraud, and it's as far as anybody's aware. So there's a couple of times it's been said, because you can't, there may, for all we know, there may be an instance of fraud taking place as we speak. We just don't know about it at this moment in time. It's yet to be discovered, for example. So I think you got to take the document sort of in the context of which it's intended, is sort of to give overall assurance that we got overall sound arrangements in place for managing and dealing with the issues, including the legal aspects and the role of the monitoring officer and the legal team and service management and all these things.
So would you suggest sort of that caveat into the, to our knowledge rather than a cast iron guarantee?
I'm pretty sure that sort of response has been given for a couple of the questions. I see busily scrolling up and down.
But should it be in the beginning? So
hello. Oh, yeah. For example,
sorry, Mark.
Oh, it's dropped out then. I couldn't hear. For example, question 1 in relation to inquiries of management in relation to fraud. What is management's assessment of risk that the financial statements may be materially misstated due to fraud, and what are the principal reasons? And the response is there'll be no specific fraud issues identified during 21-22 relating to the financial statements. I think, as far as I'm aware, that's absolutely correct. So yeah. you know, it's you've got to look at the question and then sort of make sure see how the answer fits in with the question.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Are there any comments from anyone? No? Okay. The recommendation is that we consider the report, which we've done. I assume, do we note it, or Matt, do you want us to note it or approve it?
I was just putting that in my head, ready for next year, whether to ask you to note or approve, just to be 100% assured for when this does go to Audit Wales. It would be safest perhaps this evening if you're happy to approve the response, please.
Okay. Okay, so the recommendation from the officers are that we should approve these responses. Is someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Councillor Goodjob. Thank you. So I have someone, I have a proposal and a seconder. Do I have any amendments? No? I think, can I have anyone who now disagrees with that recommendation, please show. Okay, thank you very much. So it's carried then. That's unanimous, but you note the points for next year, Matt.
Thank you very much. I do.
That's okay, no worries. Item 8 then, Quarter 2 update, Audit Wales work programme, timetable 22-23. That's you, Ian, I presume.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm Ian Phillips, Performance Audit Lead at Audit Wales. This item is the Quarter 2 work programme update. It's essentially for information. It's up to the end of September this year. It covers both Audit Wales work, CIW and Estin. Happy to take any queries on the local performance audit work at the Vale, and to take back anything else that anyone wants to raise if I'm not, because a whole host of different audit teams involved, depending on the part of the work programme, but happy to take any queries. But essentially it's an item to keep you updated of progress against the
this report be referred to Cabinet for their oversight. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Nigel. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Matthew. Oh, Councillor Goodjohn, thank you. Anyone against the recommendations? No, that's carried. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for that.
Thank you.
Item 9 then, the Corporate Risk Register, Quarter 1 update. Tom?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Chair. So this is the Quarter 1 risk report, as you said. In terms of drawing committee's attention to the report, Annex A, as usual, presents the risk summary report for Governance and Audit Committee members' consideration. At the end of Quarter 1 and relatively early on in the year, obviously, but 4 risks were scoring high, 4 medium high, 8 risks were scored in the medium zone, and 2 risks have been allocated a medium low score on the register. Committee will note that there are 2 new additions to the register this quarter. A cost of living risk has replaced the previous welfare reform risk. I think we discussed that the last time I brought the register to the committee, and that really reflects that the risk is now not only about the changes associated with universal credit, but a much broader risk to both the organisation and to our residents. And that's been allocated a high status on the register. We've also had a risk relating to environmental sustainability for a number of years, and that's been redesignated as Project Zero, reflecting the work that the organisation is doing to reach the decarbonisation targets in 2030 and 2050. Since we brought this report to your committee chair, most risks have maintained their static position. The report notes 6 exceptions to that, with some escalating and some de-escalating. The workforce risk has increased, particularly from a medium-high position to a high status, and I think that reflects the escalating capacity pressures that we're seeing across the council, being further compounded by cost of living. So I wanted to flag those to you. Also wanted to flag the deprivation of liberty safeguards risk and the Wales Community Care Information Service, or WCIS, risks. As Natasha presented earlier, significant progress has been made on deprivation of liberty safeguards, and that risk status has dropped from a medium high to a medium low position on the register, and the same has been the case for the WCIS risk as well. So in terms of forecast direction of travel, we've got a number of risks that are forecast to diminish in their impact. So legislative change and integrated health and social care risks are forecast to drop. In terms, though, of potential risks that are forecast to escalate, highlighting that reshaping services is likely to escalate. Project Zero, market fragility and demand management as well. The report makes a series of recommendations, as usual, Chair, in terms of you noting the Q1 position of the register, but also that the committee consider and then recommend to Cabinet the removal of the deprivation of liberty safeguards and the WCIS risks because of their de-escalated status, and also that you approve the inclusion of the cost of living and Project Zero risks on the register, as well as sending any comments that you may have as a committee to Cabinet.
Thank you for that, Tom. Okay, any questions, anyone? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tom. Couple of things. One, on the dolls, taking that off, given what we've just heard and the Chair's point about the likelihood of grants going, I'm not sure that I'd be supportive of that disappearing just yet. Second thing is just noting, it feels as though we've got, the best way for me to describe it is knock-on impacts. So the cost of living crisis and legislative problems at Westminster, budgetary concerns, seem to be feeding through a lot of these things at the moment, and that's just a point to note, I suppose, more than anything else. And the last thing is a question on, you mentioned workforce, and I'd be interested, are there specific service areas that are particularly acute with workforce problems? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hooper. Yes, I certainly note the comments in terms of the deprivation of liberty safeguards. Committee obviously can determine to recommend that stays on the register, or as you requested from Natasha earlier, that a future report comes and the risk would always be able to go back onto the register should you wish to do that. We could certainly keep it on for another quarter. We would have probably more of an indication of the changes that Natasha was describing in terms of responsibilities and the impact on the workforce. So perhaps it might be useful to keep it for one more quarter, Chair, as Councillor Hooper suggests. The point you made, I think, is a really good one, Councillor Hooper, about the knock-on impact and sort of integrated nature of these risks. I'm really grateful to Governance and Audit Committee members for their time a couple of weeks ago to talk about how we present corporate risks to you as a committee, and we're taking forward that review of the strategy. And one of the key things for me is about how do we show that actually there is a real interaction between things like reshaping, cost of living, the funding situation, changes to legislation. There are links back into Project Zero, and then you see those things causing an effect through other risks like the market fragility and also the workforce piece as well. I think in terms of the workforce question, we are experiencing pressures right the way across the organisation. There are particular issues, or there have been particular issues within HGV drivers. That situation seems to be more stable now than it was a few months ago, and temporary uplifts in pay have been a contributor to that. We do still experience issues within frontline social care. You'll see that reflected both within the demand management, market fragility and workforce risks. And there's a general issue around attracting into certain key specialisms. So project management is a particular issue, especially the kind of technical side of project management, for example, in property services. So I think we're seeing those kind of workforce issues across the board, but they're slightly different issues depending on the professions that they're in.
Okay, thank you for that. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions from me, Tom. The first one, probably the only risk change that surprised me a little bit was the information security risk. I can see the rationale in terms of increased control for going down, but in a macro environment where most organisations are talking about an increased likelihood of cyber attacks, I wonder what your thought was and whether that came into your consideration. And probably the second one further down on page 16, I think it was, talking about the red status risk actions. There's probably not many updates there give me a nice warm fuzzy feeling that they're really being worked on. So I wondered what your view was on whether the progress is really what you'd like to see, and if there's any that we need to consider a little bit differently from a committee perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. In terms of the information security risk, absolutely. I suppose we are very aware of the general kind of environment in terms of information security, and we had a number of discussions and debates around the level of that risk rating this time. We have had significant improvements in some of the controls, and I think they are counterbalancing what continues to be obviously a very risky area of the council's operations, and some of that investment that has been made, and we'll start to see now in some of the tools to counteract that risk, I think is what colleagues considered to outweigh the level of risk in the environment as a whole. In terms of the second point around the exceptions, so it's important to say that they are exceptions, so that there are far more actions that are on track or with an amber status than there are red ones. Looking at the ones that don't have any update against those exceptions, I would say that within the waste management risk, looking at the action around public space protection orders, that wouldn't have a demonstrable or material impact upon that risk. The information security ones, I think it might be worth giving your earlier question, Mr. Evans, that perhaps we do a bit of a focus on information security risk at the Q2 update and make sure that there's plenty of commentary in there. And then finally, in terms of the Project Zero risk, I think that exception around developing and promoting the range of events that are carbon neutral, again, would have a relatively immaterial impact on the risk overall. So I would take some assurance from that. But I think the information security one, perhaps, Chair, might be worthy of some particular focus in the next report.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are there any other questions? Councillor Good, John?
Hi, Tom again. I'm sorry to have missed the corporate risk consultation engagement on Tuesday. I just wondered if it'd been mentioned that this report is for April to June, and of course it includes forecasts for what we predict will happen in the future. Well, we definitely know what happened in July, August and September, particularly with things like market fragility. I just wondered what your thoughts were on continuing having the forecast when we're looking at this report, so relating to the future, that quarter two has now actually happened, and this is the quarter one report. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Absolutely, it's a really good question, Councillor. It's a really good question, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. And I suppose the discussion that we've been having is that the risk register does two things, I suppose. One is it provides your committee with assurance that there is a mechanism in place and embedded within the organisation to manage risks. So it is a historical, backward-looking report in that sense, but there is a framework in place for managing risks and for forecasting. There is, though, the challenge of making the information as contemporary as possible, and one of the things that we're considering is how can we provide committee with more contemporary information so that we don't have this kind of lag period that's as a result of collecting information, producing a report, and then waiting for a meeting that's in a schedule. So there is always going to be that challenge. I think certainly, though, the distance between a quarter closing and bringing this report to your committee is something that I'm committed to reducing.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great way of putting it. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, good, John. Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tom, as well, for promising to reduce the number of pages. I think 357 this time. I think that's even longer than last time. Two questions, one for you, one for Mark, that are linked. Is I can't see how assurance from internal audit comes through in this report. Just wondering, A, if I've missed it somehow, if it's kind of like built into it in another way. So whether you sort of use internal audit to help feed into the assurance over the, I suppose, the status updates and things like that you give in the report. And then secondly, for Mark, then on the flip side of that is how much of this report is used by internal audit to actually form the basis of the audit. So, for example, there's lots of actions in here. I'm looking at the moment, there's so risk 10 is around safeguarding. There's a safeguarding audit in the plan for the internal auditors for this year. So how much assurance is over this as opposed to a completely separate review of safeguarding where internal audit just go off and say, right, we're just going to review safeguarding rather than saying, here's all the actions that management have said they're going to do and providing assurance explicitly over that. So just those two, please.
Thank you, Nigel. Tom?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ireland. In terms of the kind of interaction between corporate risk and the internal audit service is primarily through the annual governance statement. So we work very closely together in terms of us using, in effect, this mechanism as one of the pillars that underpins that work. And throughout the year, I work very closely with Mark and Joan in terms of reviewing both the programme for internal audit and the corporate risk register. So we're kind of working side by side, if you like, in terms of that approach. In terms of internal audit colleagues providing a sort of level of independent assurance on the framework, that would be done through internal audits of the framework itself. But we consider this, I suppose, as a process that is owned by corporate resources as a directorate in the same way as other aspects of internal audit are. And I'll hand over to Mark for the question around the sort of use of the register within the team.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, in terms of the use we make of the risk report, well, first of all, there's an item in the plan, in the internal audit plan, headed risk management, and is to review a sample of corporate risks to identify if they are being appropriately managed and progress has been reported accurately. So we will be selecting a sample of corporate risks to actually do, I think, what you sort of maybe suggesting that we do. So that's one example. But through our knowledge, obviously, of the risk management arrangements and having sight of these reports on a regular basis, we use that information then to also feed into the wider audit plan. And as Tom says, you know, through the annual governance statement work and other specific things. So you know, as Tom says, we have conversations around if there's any specific aspects that Tom would like us to consider to feed into the audit plan as well. So we do, they do sort of feed off one another to an extent. I'm not sure if Joan wants to add anything, but yeah, we certainly use the information that's in these update reports, and when we're doing the specific audits on a sample of corporate risks, we will look to see, well, is what's been said, can that be evidenced through the work that we do? So Joan, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I just wanted to confirm that you are right. We would have regard to any risks that are there or any progress that the summary report is saying has been made, if that is the area we're focusing on in that particular service. But as Mark said, we have got that specific item in the plan as well for risk management, and that one we would definitely look at certain areas within the risk report.
Thank you, Joan. Okay, Nigel?
If I can just come back, one question then regarding the risk management review. Who chooses which risks you review in that risk management review, and how are they chosen?
Well, the auditors will choose which risks that they think should be looked at, but we wouldn't do that in isolation. You know, it's been aware of what's been looked at previously. It's taken a range of factors into account, but we don't get asked specifically, will you look at risk A, B, C, and D? We look at the ones that we think we ought to be looking at, but you know, we may take views on what they should be as well. I'm not sure if I've answered the question. I think I've answered the question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mark. I suppose, again, it's just maybe this is a gap in my knowledge, but it's whether we as a committee need to be feeding into that choice as well if we're seeking assurance over the accuracy of reporting. So as Matthew brought up earlier, the cybersecurity one, as you rightly said, Tom, I'd be interested in perhaps more of a deep dive on that one, just get a bit more information. But if there's certain areas where we are responsible for saying we are assured that things are happening, then that seems like a logical choice to perhaps feed into that, as opposed to say which ones we would like assurance over as well, perhaps. Yeah,
but by all means, if members of the committee would like to flag any particular area, but just picking those examples, we've got 2 items in the plan, one for ICT audit and one specifically on cybersecurity. So if there's maybe a specific aspect of that anybody thinks, right, you know, linked to the corporate risk register, we can flag that up, but before we do the scoping for that piece of work. So more than happy to take any suggestions on board.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, good. Okay, are there any further questions? Any comments? No, I've only just got a quick comment. Thank Councillor Hooper in regards to the deprivation of liberties, whether that stays on the risk register or not. You know, I'm not too worried, but I think given that this was looking at Q1, which was up until June 22, we're now in October, and
So Gareth?
In January, so they'll be telling us what we already know. I think, you know, provided it can come back on, then you know, I'm fairly relaxed. It can either stay on or it can go off. I think the concern I've got is we're going to be in a completely different world, I think, in January, once the local government gets its budget. And I think Tom and the management team are going to have got a strenuous job then looking at what are the real risks for the authority going forward if budget settlements are appalling, as it's been indicated possibly. So I think, for me, the recommendations can stand unless anyone's got any major grief about taking off deprivation of liberty. In regards to reviewing the risk management process and the workshop we had, I think it's going to evolve, but I think it's going to be a real exercise shortly for the members of the council, looking at actually where they're going to spend their money next year, because I think it's going to be very tough. So I think things will change quite substantially. But those are my only comments. You see the recommendations there. Someone prepared to move, please?
Are we able to take them in order, Chair?
Yep. Okay. Shall I? Yep. Recommendation 1 is to note Q1 position of the corporate risk, which is April 22 to June 22, outlined in the risk summary report Annex A.
Yeah, happy to propose.
Everyone happy with that? Someone second that? Yep. Thank you. Next one is then to recommend the Cabinet removal of the deprivation of liberty safeguards and WICIS risks, and recommend the inclusion of cost of living risk and the reframing of the environmental sustainability risk to Project Zero.
You there, Gareth? We lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry. Someone prepared who was in paragraph 2.
I think my proposal would be that we keep the risks on there for now.
Okay.
And noting the fact that in the workshop we talked about the cost of living risk being more of a cause than anything, but noting that,
yes,
I'd be happy to add those on as well. But certainly my view, the deprivation of liberty safeguards should remain on there for now, but I'm happy for other views. That'd be my proposal.
Okay, any amendments? I'm happy to accept that. But are there any amendments to this? No. Okay, so subject to what Nigel just said, the deprivation point around. What was the point, Nigel? I didn't write it down.
So the deprivation of liberty safeguards remains on. Noting that, I suppose it's just noting that there's work going on in the workshop along the risks, noting that, happy to add on the cost of living risk and the Project Zero risk on the register.
Okay, thank you. Someone prepared to move, please? Second. Thank you. In.
I think your connection.
Chair.
My connection's going, is it?
Yeah, it's just a little bit intermittent, Chair. But I just wanted to ask on recommendation 2. There was a recommendation to remove the deprivation of liberties risk. There's also a recommendation to remove the Wales Care Information Service, the WICIS risk as well, because that one's diminished. So it was just a point of clarity for the committee in terms of whether you want to keep that one on, or if you're happy for that to be removed.
I'm actually happy for that one to be removed.
Yeah, so WICIS can go off. Okay, so I think we had a mover and a seconder there, and the final one is to hear any other comments to Cabinet for their consideration and on the corporate risk register for Q1. So just picking up the points which have been made in 2 and 1 above. Everyone happy with that? Someone prepared to move then? All 3 recommendations? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. The Internet Audit Risk-Based Plan 2022-23. Joe?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, I'm Joan Davis, the Deputy Head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Agenda item 10 provides a position statement on the progress being made against the audit plan. It's a familiar report that we bring to this committee on a regular basis. The information provided is for the first half of the financial year, that is up to the 30th of September 2022. Appendix A illustrates that 10 audit reviews have been completed, 7 with an audit opinion to date. Some reports are issued in draft and 18 are currently ongoing. The finalised audits have made a total of 12 recommendations to date. We'd just like to make sure committee notes, however, that the Regional Internal Audit Service has recently been successful in recruiting 7 new members of staff. Whilst this is a very positive step, in the short term, until new staff are trained and able to fully contribute to the delivery of the plan, there is a negative impact in that overall productivity of the team due to the support the new members require is affected. So to help with this, audits have been allocated to SWAP to complete on our behalf. And also we're monitoring the situation very, very carefully. But at this stage, I just want to sort of provide the assurance that it's currently felt that there will be sufficient coverage by the year end to provide an overall audit opinion. And obviously, as the new staff become more trained, we're going to get more efficient as time goes on. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that, Joan. Very positive report. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Joan. And yeah, I'm pleased that we've got you've got some new staff to undertake this work. I'm just interested in SWAP. Which audits have they actually got? Because there's nothing on the plan to show me which ones they're doing, and I'm just it's probably an unfair question, but is their level of assurance the same as you would have in your own organisation? Thank you.
Thank you if I answer that, Chair. Yes, so far SWAP have been given the Project Zero climate change and energy efficiency piece of work. This is a piece of work they've been given across all 4 of our partner organisations. It's felt that they can bring in some knowledge that they've got outside of the regional service, and so they can add value to that piece of work. We're very mindful when we do give work to SWAP of what we give them. We try not to be too service specific because it's more difficult for them to get sort of involved in service specific areas. So we do try and give them overarching pieces of work. Another piece of work that we're considering giving them, and we're in discussions, is probably around procurement or project and programme management, again, because they can share experiences from their other areas that they work with.
Good, thank you for that, Joan. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple regarding Appendix A and some of the scopes. I just wanted to check that, well, which is just really, I suppose, just bring to attention is making sure they're outcome focused rather than output focused. So there's a couple of examples. Number 10, climate change and energy efficiency. It says to ensure that plans are in place to minimise the use of energy and to deliver this programme by 2030. I'd want to make sure that plans are in place and are being achieved. So I suppose it's just that bit about making sure that we're reviewing progress and outcomes that will give us the real assurance. So I guess it's just some of those, and the project and programme management one as well, especially if that's going to SWAP. It refers to governance arrangements rather than project and program management. And just clarification, the word boards in there. So I have got a couple of others, Chair, if it's okay, but the word boards in there, is that project boards and program boards rather than committee boards and things like that? Yeah, yes. Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, I think it's just a few of them. Number 22, catering company, says to provide assurance on the operation of the catering company. I mean, that could be a 400-day audit or a 2-day audit. So again, I think it's just a little bit more information on just clarifying what it is that you're getting assurance over would be great. Number 25, capital program, is great because that's really specific on what it is you're going to review. So it's just really a bit more information in those, and a bit more outcome focused would be really useful, just so I get assurance that the audit is going to look at something that's really adding value rather than just something that's a bit more tick box. And again, if we can link it back to those risks previously as well, that would kind of close that loop, if you like, which would be fantastic.
Chair, if I could just sort of
Yes,
provide some assurance. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Nigel, thank you for your comments. When this was put together, that was sort of the initial audit objective and scope. So certainly as the audit is then scoped out, and particularly when it's completed, when it is brought to you here, I'll make sure that that's updated so you can see exactly what was covered and what the assurance has been provided on. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joan. Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. And this might be my memory, Joan, but I'm just following on from what Nigel said. I guess I don't remember seeing a summary of anything of the reports that have been completed. And I guess we've got the output of audit activity. My knowledge of the council aside, I'd expect to see some of those summaries coming through, so we could have that assurance loop and bring it back.
Yeah, if I can answer that. What we normally do is give you the detail if it's a limited assurance report. So we bring to the committee if we found an issue and we can only give limited assurance. So we highlight the concerns and what measures then have been agreed to put in place. We don't tend to bring anything that's provided reasonable or substantial assurance. But obviously, if you did want certain ones, there's no reason why not. That's just what's always been the case in the Vale.
Sure. Okay. I guess from my perspective, and I'm one member of the committee, so I'm happy to bow to the rest. But I guess I get a lot of value out of seeing the results of your internal audit. So I'd be interested across the board, whether it positive assurance or otherwise. So I guess that's my view. But I'll leave it at the door of the committee.
I think it may be worthwhile committee, if they do consider that, Matthew, sort of once the audit outcome has come out from there, if there's anything we need to look at, is maybe sort of just do a little survey of some, saying, right, we'll pick audit number 1, 7 and 6. So so that you get that sort of litmus test on those individuals rather than ask for them all.
I guess from my perspective, what I'm used to seeing is just a sort of 3 or 4 line summary. So don't get me wrong, I have absolutely no desire to pad this out with full audit reports of everything. But I guess to illustrate my example, and we've got some that have got medium level recommendations, but reasonable assurance, and I'm generally taking an interest in what were those medium level recommendations, or how do I form an overall view on the governance structure using internal audit output if I don't see the internal audit output.
Can you take that on board, Joan?
Yeah, yes, certainly.
Lovely. Thank you. Nigel.
Thanks, Matt, for bringing that up, because it was something I meant to mention. The other thing I forgot, which I did mean to mention as well, was well done on recruiting 7 new members of staff, because I know what that's like at the moment. It is really, really hard. So well done on managing to do that. I completely agree with Matt's point. The other bit, 1-line summary, is also the scope of the reviews, is what is in. And again, I'm not talking the whole thing, but just a paragraph on what is in and out of scope, because what am I receiving assurance over? And I think for me, again, it comes down to the recommendation in this report, which is just for noting. So at the moment, it's very tick box. Are you on track to complete the plan? Yes or no? That's the information we're getting. If I'm supposed to be assured that the council's processes are working effectively by these reports, I've got a tick in a box and a number of recommendations. I don't have anything regarding the scope of the reviews. I don't know what those findings were. I'm not getting assurance from this report. I'm purely getting a tick box. We said we'd do this many audits. We're on track for doing that many audits. That's all I'm getting from it. So I agree with Matthew. If the purpose of this report is to give us assurance and to line us up at the end of the year so that we can sign off on a report that says we are assured that the council's operations are operating in line with the findings of internal audit, I'm going to need more information.
If I can come back there, yes, certainly. What we could do is maybe for the next time I can increase the detail in the column initial audit scope and objective. So it's backward looking, because if the work's been done, I could populate it in there if there's anything to provide the assurance of what the coverage was, what the outcome was. But equally, if there was any kind of cross-cutting themes or anything that was coming up that we felt that should be brought to your attention, for example, into separate directorates, we found the similar issue, we would bring that to you within the report, because that we would be linking those kind of issues. So, but yeah, I'll have a go at changing or providing some more information for next time, and hopefully that'll satisfy you.
I'll leave Matthew respond as well, because just to say if that covers what he wants as well. But I think that would be great from my perspective, and certainly for key ones like, for example, the risk management overview one. I think it'd be really useful to see a bit more detail on key ones like that, as well, that provide assurance over a wider area. But yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Joan.
Mark, sorry.
Matthew. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on, Matthew. Go on.
No, I think that satisfies me as well. It's just enough to hang your hat on, to say, you know, that they are coming the audit, and that should be in the fewest number of words we can to give you that audit. So, you know, I certainly don't want you to write any more than you've got, but that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up the points really. Yeah, there's different ways of doing this, and I've come from one authority where every single audit report used to go up to every single committee, and the committee used to get bogged down in the detail, which obviously we don't want to go down that road. We can certainly provide additional information along the lines that Joan has suggested. They're all the standard format. We've got strengths and weaknesses for every report. We've got a report coming up on recommendations, so that's probably where recommendations, if you've got particular queries on recommendations, that probably sits there. But if we supplement this report with some additional information and see if you think that hits the bill, and as well as maybe specifically reporting on limited or no assurance reports, we don't have them very often, but we do have them from time to time. Maybe if there's a particular cross-cutting report or something that we're aware that the committee is particularly interested in, maybe we can sort of put a bit more detail in for those types of reports as well. So we'll bear the comments in mind and see what we can do for the next scheduled report. I think it'll probably be January time. I think it will be the next scheduled progress against the plan report.
Thank you for that, Mark. Are there any other questions? Any comments? No, if we go to the recommendations, then it's got committee note the content of the report and the progress made against the 22-23 internal annual risk-based plan. Just picking up your point, Nigel and Matthew, do we just need that in future, when reports come before committee, that there's an executive summary setting out the scope and findings of the completed reports? Would that meet your needs? So we get a specific report, you know, in the January report, if you've completed 7, say you've completed 7 audits, you just get a very short executive summary or 2-liners or whatever, which sets out, you know, what the scope was and actually what the findings was.
Yeah, I would say Matthew can come in if he disagrees, but I would say medium and high priority recommendations, for example. You don't not particularly interested in the lows.
Okay.
Unless there's, I noticed in the recommendation report next, there's some that had like 10 low priorities. So if there's 10 low priorities, perhaps I need to know if there's something fundamental going on there. But other than that, yeah, just a quick one on the sort of key issues from the audit, really good and bad. I mean, but again, as Matthew said, we're looking for a couple of lines here, not a novel by Victor Hugo.
But if we could just get amended sort of the recommendation, so it is actually reported to us rather than just leave it. If Gareth could get the bones out of that to for a recommendation, picking up those points. Someone prepared to move that? Thank you, Nigel. Someone prepared to second? Matthew, can I have a show of hands, please? Anyone against? Thank you. I tried to catch you out, Councillor Hooper. Thank you very much. Thanks, Joan and Matt. The next item is the recommendations monitoring.
Yes, Chair, that's me as well. Thank you. So further to previous discussions at Governance and Audit Committee, a recommendation monitoring report has been produced and presented at Appendix A. As this is the first recommendation monitoring report brought to this committee, all recommendations made by the Regional Internal Audit Service since the implementation of MK Insight software have been included. So it goes back to April 2021. Moving forward, it is suggested that only outstanding recommendations from previous financial years be included, together with the recommendations made in this current year. Appendix A illustrates that during 21-22, 183 recommendations were made and 117 have been implemented. 9 have surpassed their implementation date, so are outstanding and are continuing to be chased, while 33 have a future target date. It should be noted that recommendations made within a limited assurance report are not individually chased up, but are reviewed during a planned follow-up audit in the area, and that accounts for 23 in that table. One recommendation was not agreed by the relevant service area, and that's indicated in the appendice. However, the manager offered an alternative solution which was accepted to mitigate the risk. Of the 12 recommendations made so far in 22-23, 5 have been implemented and 7 have a future target date. This information has been extracted from our audit software system, and views are sought in respect of content and format provided. So once the views from all 4 governance and audit committees within the regional service have been obtained, a standard report will be commissioned to streamline the process in producing this information. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks for this, Joan. I think this is a really useful report. I'm glad we've got it. It's just a question on where you've had a high priority recommendation that's been accepted, been implemented and accepted, obviously. Do you, is there any sort of reflection on it from management as to whether or not it's doing what they thought it would do, or do you just wait for a follow-up before you come in? Because there was obviously some concerns, but do you keep in touch with them and there's an ongoing dialogue?
Yeah, if it's a high, sorry, Chair, if I can answer that. If it's a high recommendation, obviously that's signifying that there is perceived high risk, and yes, there is an ongoing dialogue. We try to get them to give us a realistic implementation date, but if it's a high risk, we do try and push for that implementation date, although realistic, to be timely, because obviously until they do it, that risk is there. However, if they can't fully implement that recommendation for whatever pressure, particularly over the last year or so, there's been pressures elsewhere, we do work with them to see if they can at least do something in the short term, and then we will go back and do a full audit just to provide assurance that they have all been taken on board.
Sorry, can I just follow up, Joe? I'm probably more interested in the efficacy of the recommendation. So do you keep in touch with them to say this was something that worked, that solved the problem, rather than just implementing it? Because sometimes, even though people may have agreed the recommendation and implemented it, it might not have been the right thing. And sometimes hindsight can help us to get that right. That's more of the nub of my question. Maybe I wasn't clear. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Yes. We do work with them, and obviously I suppose we don't particularly ask them that question. However, with any high recommendations, we do a follow-up audit. So really, I suppose it's a silent point. If there's no more recommendations, it is effective.
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Just get my hand down. Yeah, I really like the style of the report as well. I think it's really clear. I think it's a really good report. I suppose the bit that again is missing for me, the insurance side, is if we could add it on to the end, is where there's certainly medium priority recommendations that are overdue, whether we could just have a summary of those just at the end of the table. So the summary of finding, risk and recommendation and why it's outstanding, and also if there's a revised implementation date, so when they're planning on doing it, again, just to give us that assurance. I think that would complete the report for me. I think it's a really good one, but it's just knowing why some of them are outstanding. Particularly the one that really concerns me is the corporate safeguarding one. It's such a big area. It's one of the key risk areas for the council. 5 recommendations raised, of which 2 were medium, and both mediums are still outstanding with 1 low priority. So again, I think that's one that I'd certainly like an update in future to find out what's happening with those. And then I'm going to be that really annoying person, and I know I hate getting this question when I'm the internal auditor, which is there's 3 audits on here: DBS checks, pothole repairs, and planning applications and appeals. They've got 11, 11 and 13 recommendations respectively. Some of them are quite evenly balanced with medium priority recommendations. So pothole repairs, 5 medium, 6 low, and you've still given it reasonable assurance. I just wondered, I know that you're going to be saying this was a long time ago and I'm asking you to pull things back, but I suppose it's just the question over that doesn't sit very comfortably with me, that's still a reasonable assurance. It sounds like quite a few recommendations. I suppose it's just, is there any assurance you can give me about the rest of those areas that makes those areas still reasonable given that number of recommendations?
If I can answer that, obviously I haven't got the specific report in front of me. When it was reviewed, it was comfortable that the assurance level was correct in light of the recommendations, but I can get more information. Obviously, it's really difficult to say, well, if they're medium, it has to be this, and if it's low, it has to be that. It's not an exact science. It's more, it depends really what it's all about. So, but I can certainly, if you'd like me to circulate some information to you on that particular one, I certainly can.
I think to be honest, going forward, I know it's a difficult question. So I think from my perspective, I'd be happy that we focus on the ones going forwards. But I guess it's just noting that if we note one that comes up that's got 5 medium and 6 low priority recommendation is reasonable assurance, I'd probably ask why. So for your future reference, if one comes up like that, I will probably ask that question. But I appreciate they're older audits, so it's very difficult to answer.
Thanks, Nigel. Mark?
Yeah, just to add to what Joan said, really, I think in the Vale, we've never reported on low priority recommendations previously, so it's only now that we've sort of started reporting on them, because they're very much sort of be a good idea if you can do these if you can, but they're not sort of essential or things that we deem critical in any way, otherwise they would be high or potentially medium. So they're things that we suggest to services that, you know, if they are able to do them, or if they got the capacity to do these things, that might assist or might improve things. So it's almost a bit like, I shouldn't say don't worry too much about the low priority ones, because why are we reporting them almost? But it's just to give you a feel for, we are making some recommendations or suggestions, but the ones that really need to be focused on are the high and medium ones, just to throw that into the discussion, really.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're certainly in my company where we're obviously making these similarly low priority recommendations. We also use a suggestion category. We're trying to rein back on some of the more suggestion side of it, just with the cost of living impacts and the pressure everyone's under. I know that's something we're trying to rein back on. So I do understand that. It's just when I look at 10 low priorities in an audit, my immediate response is, without knowing the scope, is there something fundamental that's occurring right the way through that process that aggregates into a bigger risk, rather than just being 10 low priorities on their own? And I guess maybe that's the distinguishing between low priority recommendations and suggestions, and we need to make more suggestions rather than low priorities. But I don't know your categorization, so I'll take your lead on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Nigel. Councillor Goodjohn?
Just reminding officers to perhaps when thinking about these reports, just to think of it from our point of view, we need to make sure we have all the information in front of us before we come to committee, so we're not waiting on an answer for a question before we can properly scrutinise. And that's the only reason that Mr. Ireland's put up this point. That's all we're asking for, but otherwise, brilliant stuff.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. Are there any other questions? Any comments from anyone? Oh, Mark, or is that a legacy hand, or?
No, just to sort of advise the members, really. We had a governance and audit committee in Merthyr Tydfil this afternoon as well, so they had the exactly the same format report, obviously different content presented to them, so they were quite happy with the format as well. So what we hope to do is use the same format across all 4 authorities. Just makes our life a little bit easier in terms of consistency of reporting. So it was well received there. And the only other point, taking on board any other suggestions members have, is around the frequency of reporting. So we are suggesting doing this on a quarterly basis because the auditors chase up the services on a quarterly basis. I know it was discussed at the last meeting that I had to leave early about having this sort of report presented, I think, at every meeting. I'd have some reservations around doing that, if I'm honest, and I would ask the committee to consider having this report on a quarterly basis and then see how that goes. That was my suggestion.
Okay, Nigel?
I'd hate to be one to go back on my previous comments regarding outputs and outcomes, so I'd prefer it to come quarterly and be accurate, and therefore have it as a good outcome than have it tick box coming to every meeting. So I'd be happy with that if that aligns with your reporting process and therefore the actual data within it is more accurate.
Thank you, Nigel. Sorry, Joan?
Yeah, I'd just like to say as well that I think it links so closely to the progress against the plan report. So I'll bring them both together. So when the one comes, the other one comes, because I think you need to see them both as a whole, really. So that's what we'll do moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? The only comment I'd make is just going back from Nigel's point, is where we've got medium recommendations which have been outstanding on by way of timeline for some considerable time, and then not being dealt with by the service. I think we need to know about that sooner rather than later, and we're not, what I wouldn't want is them to just float in ether. If they are medium concerns and the directorate or the team of individuals are not dealing with it, I think if they've missed a couple of dates to catch them up, then my view would be I think we ought to call the head of service in to account for why they're not dealing with it. Obviously there may be reasons and we don't know what those reasons are. But if they're ignoring them and in the hope that they'll go away, I don't think we're doing our job of assurance correct. So I think, we may need just put a shot across some of the bows of some of these individuals to say, look, you've been given a reasonable amount of time to put in place whatever needs to be put in place here. You've had a couple of bites of the cherry here, but you've still not dealt with it. And I think they just need to come to committee maybe and just to account for why they're not dealing with it. That's the only comment I'd make in regards to moving forward. We don't just let them run. Okay, the recommendations there are that the committee consider the information provided in respect of the status of the recommendations made, and we have done, and we've given, obviously there are comments come out of that for Joan and the team to take back. And the committee review the information contained within the report and provide feedback on the content and format of information provided. And again, we've given that feedback, and hopefully what's been said can be incorporated into future reports. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconded. Thank you, Nigel. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried unanimously. And then we got the updated forward work programme, item 12.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll just sort of briefly comment on this one. Again, it's the usual format that you receive at every meeting. At the moment, there's 4 items on the agenda. Audit Wales reports, if there are any due, then updated forward work programme, the whistleblowing policy and performance update, so that'll be a substantive item. I've just realised item 3, governance and audit committee self-assessment. That's something we do periodically based on a questionnaire to all members and so on, gives an opportunity to reflect on how the committee is actually operating. SIPFA are due to publish updated guidance in terms of the role of audit committees and governance and audit committees. Now it's due out. It was due out in the autumn, and the timetable slipped slightly. Last I heard, it was due out at the end of October, which is obviously very soon. I don't know what will be in that in terms of sort of checklists or suggested questionnaires and so on. So I'm just flagging that up. Part of me is thinking, well, we should wait until the guidance comes out and then based our assessment based on that updated guidance. If it's not out, whether we should perhaps delay it slightly, but I'd be happy to be guided by members really. There's no specific timescale for needing to do this. It's just something that we should be doing on a periodic basis. But just wanted to flag that up. But also we had the update from Gemma earlier in relation to the accounts. It's possible that if the accounts don't hit the November timeline, that the accounts might be coming alongside the annual governance statement and on 2 other reports to the December meeting. So things could change a little bit by then.
I think, Mark, we just keep it as it is and be flexible. You know, if what you said, number 3 doesn't come forward, then you could pull it, or if it does, then you leave it in. If the accounts come forward, then we add those in. So, you know, I think we just need to be flexible in regards to the forward work programme. That's my view. Any questions from anyone? Any comments? No. Okay, see the recommendations. We note the forward work programme and the committee is asked to endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting, which we do. There ain't any people I don't think we would like to invite, subject to the officers coming along to present. You know, if there needs to be flexibility in that programme, then that takes place. Someone prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Someone second. Councillor Good, John. Thank you. Anyone against? No. Thank you. Final item 13 then, which is in the open sessions. Any other items? I have none. We go with. I don't know whether someone should move the correct provisions, but there are no closed session reports. Can I just thank everyone for attending this evening? Thank you, members, for your contributions. Some really good discussion and debate there. Thank you, officers, for presenting the reports. And I now close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Well done,
Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye.
Thank you.